Hi, and welcome to the Wix Top Voices panel, a special senior panel in which we have the pleasure of hearing from some of the top voices in the global tech industry. Our esteemed panelists today are Yuval Kesten, Director of Engineering at Facebook. Hi, Yuval. Karin Moscovici, VP of R&D at Riskified Technology. Hi, Karin. Ohad Jassin, General Manager at Azure AI at Microsoft. Hi, Ohad. Hi. Gai Berkovich, Chief Operating Officer at Waze. Hi, Guy. And finally, Sivan Brezniak, Viewer Company Manager at Wix. Hi, Sivan. So in the next hour, we'll be covering three important topics. The first will be the effects of working from home on the company and its engineering activities. The second will be freedom versus standardization, how to allow developers the freedom to choose any technology they want while sticking to the company's standards. And lastly, maintaining dev velocity and the quality of products in a growing company. That's a lot of ground to cover in one or a bit more than 1 hour. So let's jump right in. And our listeners will have the opportunity to raise their own questions to the panelists further on during the event. So we'll start with what is probably the most pressing problem for many organizations right now around the world, and especially for companies here in Israel, which is currently in a nationwide lockdown. It's the effects of working from home. So Ohad from Microsoft, I'll turn the first question to you. Since the very beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, Microsoft has implemented the work from home policy. With this experience in mind, what's your opinion of the feasibility of working from home in the long term? I mean, if it's possible to work from home for a company as a rule, not in just as a crisis mode.
So I think right from the start, we at Microsoft were fortunate to get some solid advice and guidance from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which has probably the world's largest department for epidemiologists and research of diseases as the one challenging currently our nation and worldwide. And I think in order to predict, how our own talent pool and how with the way we work and manage our work and life across the organization is definitely evolving, has been evolving ever since COVID started, and will continue to evolve. If I look at the past, we were always, focused around how our employees and our talent creates impact, and not counting time at the office as something which is, any metric of some sort. But it has definitely evolved. The way we collaborate, the way we handle, continuous task or ad hoc incidents. One example could be, at the beginning of COVID, Azure and probably most of, cloud services experience an exponential growth. And it's kind of like a moment where you want to assemble a team together in order to firefight whatever incidents there are, cope with the scale and the requirements that it projects on your engineering systems. And I think, one of the ways which we evolved as an organization was specifically around that. Like, how do you cope with growth of hundreds of % in a usage that was already big as is prior to COVID? And we definitely saw cases where people worked continuously from home, collaborated on very innovative solutions in order to keep systems running and meeting the demand. But as I look forward towards the future, I don't think that we can, go back to whatever it was before. as a balance. I mean, I definitely love, the personal touch, and I'm looking forward for the day where I can, meet my team and my organization in person rather than, through digital means, and travel abroad and meet my colleagues and peers that are sitting, for our case, in Seattle, in Redmond, but wherever they might be worldwide. But I think those are going to be more like anchors. If I look at myself as an example, I've took off about 9 hours of commute per week, traveling to the office that we have in Herzliya or Haifa. I have teams in both of those locations. And those 9 hours that I was able to grasp back and use in a productive manner, and also on a personal aspect, spending more times with my kids. The fact that I can, lunch with them on a daily basis is priceless. Who would have thought this was ever possible prior to COVID? And I at least personally don't intend to give up on that as long as they agree to keep on having lunch with me. I guess at some point they will, by their own means, decide to move
Ohad,
on.
some people, I mean, for some people, the experience that you had with improving their work-life balance is a good experience. For others, I've heard the term, it's not like you're working from home, you're sleeping in the office. It's like for some people, the life-work balance has even gone worse than before. Did people in your organization had that bad experience as well?
So we definitely see cases of people being, experienced fatigue or even being worn out. I think it's a combination of a few things. It's a bit of a self-control type of a problem. You gotta set boundaries. You gotta set, some limits to when you work and when you actually spend your life. But as an organization, we have a lot of commitment in order to make sure that we identify, support, provides mechanisms for all sorts of situations that we have. Like, for example, as a company policy, we provide, I think it's up to 12 or 14 weeks of time off, which is not sickness days and not, personal time off. It's actually times that we consider as COVID or family coping time, where as an employee, I can take half a day or a full day off or a couple of weeks in order to support my family, whether it's, elderly parents or children that need that time. So, but it goes back to, always the personal responsibility of the employee and the manager to have a conversation around how to balance those things out.
Okay, so Ohad's experience was favorable in a sense. We can get the sense of that. Sivan from Wix, your experience during the early stages of the pandemic, I think it was a bit different, right? And by the way, the other panelists, feel free to raise your hand if you have anything to add in that regard. Sivan, go ahead.
Right. So for us, it's actually been really, really hard. As my group is one group at Wix, and just before we were instructed to go work from home. We actually started execution of a really, really big project that's cross-company with many, many developers that needed to be onboarded into this onto this project. So we were all at the office and everybody was working together, and we were doing onboarding sessions, and we were working on dividing the project into different tracks and tasks and people and different leadership for this project. And there were actually a very limited amount of people, about 6 people, that initiated everything and that POC'd this. And then we needed to onboard dozens of people, almost 100 people onto this project. And all of this happened at the same time that the COVID pandemic broke out. And then we needed to start working from home. And all of these people are Some of them are in Israel and Tel Aviv. Some of them aren't in Tel Aviv, are at different Wix offices, and some of them are abroad, like in Kiev and Dnipropetrovsk. And we needed to onboard all of these people while everybody was working from home. And this is a new technology, a new architecture for the system. And we need to teach everybody what to do. And we don't even have all of the answers about how to do everything ourselves. And working from home is something that, even though we do enable people to work from home, we still expect people to come to the office at least 3 times a week, as working together, talking, brainstorming, teamwork is part of our core, the core of the company and the core of my group. And it was something that was just taken away from us, and we really didn't know how to deal with it at that point. So we really had to recap very quickly and decide how we're going to do this, and while we're still onboarding people, and we're very limited on time, and we need to start executing this entire project. And like everything that we know how to do, like working together and talking and brainstorming and helping people. And we actually sit very, very closely, everyone together, and like walking between people and just like asking questions out loud in the room. And then like we have teams and team leaders and all that we need to teach them how to work in this new technology and under this new architecture, and everything while we just started to work from home, which was something that we really did not know how to do very well. So for us, it was a very tough experience.
In an unfavorable condition, if I understand what you're saying, right? It's not the daily routine. It's not it caught you in a specific moment in a project's life, in which the pains of working from home were more pronounced.
Exactly. And generally, we started out a completely new architecture that we were just POC'd it. We had a proof of concept that this is going to work. We had new technologies to adopt, and we needed to learn ourselves how to do this. So we actually did a lot of Zoom meetings, and we did a lot of pair programming online, and we did a lot, and we started using Slack more intensively and so on. However, when you have 100 people working on a project that only 6 people know how to work on, and a lot of people are facing the same issues and same questions, and everything has just started working, and we have all new infrastructure and all new systems, it was just very, very hard, because a lot of people were encountering the same problems, and we were dealing with things again and again and again. And it took us time to understand how to manage the project, how to put people in the right positions and answer the correct questions at the right time, and have people be able to focus on their tasks and what they need to do, and not on everything that's bothering around. And also a lot of people had issues with like Ohad was talking about, working from home is also working with your children at home, and working with under different circumstances. I have 2 young children, and they didn't have kindergarten, and we couldn't go home, and I live in Tel Aviv in a small apartment. So it was very, very hard to manage the meetings and set times that everybody was free at the same time. And we did have babysitters help us and so on. However, Wix, unlike other companies, Wix did enable us to come to the office and work from the office under the government instructions, of course, with 2 people in a room and so on, which was very helpful. So we had time to focus on work, and then we did work from home some of the time, but and some of people were working from home all the time. But the fact that we had the flexibility to do what we felt was correct, and to manage this project, work together when needed, brainstorm and so on together, then that helped us a lot.
So that's an interesting experience that is quite different, maybe because it caught you in a different time within a project. So Gai from Waze, let me turn to you, because you mentioned that your opinion of the feasibility of working remotely in a company for the long term kind of changed because of your experience during the pandemic, right?
Yeah. First of all, I think that the best thing is still working from the office. No one is going to convince me that it is this pandemic is so great and now we can all work from home. No, and as I told you, I feel sometimes that it's not working from home, it's living at work. And we need to remember that each and every person that we manage and each and every person from our organization experience it differently. So we need to have a lot of patience. However, if before the pandemic I was quite sure that we need always to be in the office, now I'm more certain that we can actually have a mixture in the future, sometimes working from the office and sometimes working from home. But as I see it, when everybody are doing the same, let's say when everybody are in the office and few people are working from home from time to time, it's not that easy. And this creates another challenge. So if everybody are working from home, everybody have the same issues, and we are empathetic to each other, this is great. So as I see it in the future, we are going to have a mix of working from home and working from the office, but as we go along, different teams will have some kind of a routine or a process. Let's all have a 1 day working from home or 2 days working from home or things like that, because then the team can actually work together and we're going to leave the specific tasks to that day. And it's not about work-life balance. I see many people working very hard, as Sivan just said, that suddenly they're working much harder and they have more challenges at home. But sometimes they also see the positive things. So if we are going to do it in the right mixture, this is going to be very good. And the second thing is about meetups, like we're doing this conference. In the past, I was sure that face-to-face and we need to meet. Actually, I was waiting to come and see the Wix offices next to the beach, next to the ocean. And I was really thrilled about this invitation. And now I need to do it from the same office I have at home. But if I'm looking at the meetups that we are doing in Waze, every month we have a different community meetup somewhere in the world. And since COVID started, we are doing it virtually. And we are learning a lot because suddenly we can touch many more people. If in a real event, we are inviting only between, I don't know, 70 to 100 people from the community, suddenly we have hundreds of people coming to the virtual communities. But they are still waiting for this meetup, the physical meetup. So I just spoke the other day with our community manager. We are going to have a mix next year, or once the COVID is off, and we're going to have both virtual and non-virtual. Just to share one thing, I look at the survey that we did in Google, and different countries have different perspective of working from home. So Israel, for example, more than 60%, is actually higher than that, wants to work only from the office. So, and if I'm comparing it to Europe, suddenly this drops to about 50% that wants to work only from the office. But if I look at the survey, and most of the people, more than 75%, want some kind of a mixture. I didn't see high percentage that wants to work only from home.
I think, yeah, that's also my experience. But you're saying that something that is helpful, in your opinion, is dividing the week into days in which everybody can work from home and days in which everybody are in the office, right? That's the bottom line?
Yeah, if you are not doing that, and one day this group is missing and the other day that group is missing, suddenly you're losing all the nature of the meetings. I think that few people, that Sivan just spoke about it, what she was missing is the face-to-face meeting. Now, if every day somebody else is going to be missing, it's not going to help. So I think that we are going to build some kind of a routine in the future.
Great, thanks. So Karin, I'll pass the question to you. I have a question for you about the cultural aspect of this epidemic. But first, what is your opinion of the feasibility of working from home in the long run after the COVID pandemic is over?
So I think I kind of agree with my colleagues here because, like everyone, we didn't know if this so-called experiment would be as smooth as it actually was in terms of ability to perform everyday tasks and ability to be as productive as before. And it turned out it's definitely possible, and our team is still able to produce excellent results while maintaining high quality and stability of our product. So we can say it's feasible, but really when considering other aspects, I definitely think that for some companies, for the long term, working completely remote 5 days a week is not necessarily the best thing to do, and especially in R&D work, which is very collaborative and where the team is the most important work unit. And a big part of our culture at Riskified is simply working together and being together, having fun together. It's a big part of what makes work enjoyable. And
touching upon my follow-up question, which is the relationship between the culture of the organization. We all know that different organizations have different cultures, and the how an organization can adapt to work from home. You think that different cultures are not equal in that sense?
I do, because when I look at Riskified, then I can definitely see some factors in our culture that really helped us adapt quickly to this situation. And I think that if you don't have this factor in your organizations, then you would probably have much more difficulties. And the first factor, I think, is collaboration. If your team didn't collaborate well before, and as a company you didn't emphasize collaboration, then I'm sure you've experienced difficulties in remote work where you can't count on the mutual physical surroundings to be a natural, strong enabler for collaboration. But an even more important factor, I think, in your culture is empowerment and autonomy. Because as a rule, we trust our employees to do excellent work without management having to constantly supervise. So when management isn't physically present in the immediate surroundings, we know we can still trust our employees to do excellent work remotely. Our team leaders are accountable for their teams anyway. That's not changing when we work from afar. And we also trust them to make all the required adjustments, since they had autonomy to make adjustments in order to improve their team's work before when we were in the office. So they still have this power right now. So that's really helped us. I think that the last, but definitely not the least culture factor, which is really helpful here, is transparency. When you don't see each other every day, you can get a sense of not knowing what's going on, and maybe a little bit of a feeling of instability, especially for new employees, which we've recruited during this period. And it's important for us as a company management to be transparent, update everyone about everything we're doing, ensure employees that we're on top of the situation, and making all the required adjustments that we needed to do during this period. And that's basically saying to them that we've got their backs. I think it keeps a sense of stability and helps employees feel an amount of certainty in this uncertain period, and that they can trust their work environment. And it also helps us as management to be on top of everything, because we have this constant stream of feedback. Our leads and employees tell us everything that's going on.
When you're talking about communication with employees and transparency, is communication done in your specific case in Riskified on a on a one-on-one basis when you're talking, over Zoom or whatever, or do you do that over mail in the entire company? I mean, keeping transparency is a lot about communication. How do you do that?
Absolutely, and we do that. Like the answer is all of the above. Our CEO writes mails periodically, updating about everything, and also we have company meetings where he talks about it and also answers questions from company employees. But we also enhanced our HR team, and our HR team is having a lot more one-on-one sessions with our employees, making sure they have all their basic needs, but also that they're not alone. And this way we can also get feedback and answer some more questions in a wider forum. And we also make sure that our managers have these coffee breaks with their teams. These not so strictly professional meetings where they can talk about everything. So definitely when transparency is part of your culture, then it happens in all the levels.
So a kind of informal meetings, coffee coffee breaks, you mean like people just talking over Zoom about everything, I understand.
Yeah, exactly. As well as formal, you know, because you need to also provide information, but all the possible mediums, we definitely put a lot of focus on that. And, you know, the coffee breaks are also important for the social aspect, but that's a different topic.
That's an interesting point. And of course, HR going to have lots of work to do in that kind of environment. Here to you, Yuval from Facebook. Part of management, I mean, the skill of a management is rallying a team around some sort of a common vision or a common goal. When everybody is not in the office, how do you as a manager manage to create such, you know, camaraderie, people working together towards something common?
So first, I don't think that I'm doing it really well. I think I'm still learning and adapting. And also, you know, the situation changes every month because we hire new people, we kick off new projects, we change our priorities. So every month is like, and the situation is at home is different. You know, the kids are at preschool, the kids are at home. Some of them are there, some of them are here. So it's really changing. I think that, you know, part of the problem here that you usually, as you know, as a manager that leads, you know, a group of people with managers, you know, well, you are supporting other managers and they support the team, you need to rely on the rest of the managers on the team to kind of like create this sense of camaraderie. But some of them are new as well. We have an engineering manager, Gal, that we were really excited to hire, but he joined straight into quarantine, and then quarantine became the first lockdown, and then Facebook went into mandatory work from home, so he never met his team, and I think he's been here since March probably, and he never met his team in person. So definitely we have, you know, extreme challenges. I think, you know, the mitigations that we are trying to have is a lot of communication, but also precise communication. So you don't want to waste people's time because there is a sense where, you know, you need to be more respectful of people's time and don't just do, you know, redundant meetings just to convey something that you would have said to people in the kitchen or in the corridor if you were at the office. But at the same time, you lose a lot of your abilities as a manager, especially the interpersonal abilities. So anyway, it's a combination of writing more than you usually do and investing more in what you write, so it will be more precise and people understand it. It's about doing some random one-on-ones across your team. So for example, you know, you don't just with your direct reports, but also maybe with your skip levels and just like a bunch of people, new people, tenured people, senior people, junior people from across the team to find ways to get some of them to be champions of the message that you want to convey to the team, like, you know, this big new priority, or even, you know, the work-life balance message. Don't burn yourself. We're here for the long run. If I'll just be the one sharing it again and again, you know, people will get the banner blindness and they will stop listening to me. But if I'll find champions of this message from across the team, I think that will be at least I found it to be very effective. So my calendar is full of meetings that might look arbitrary or even random to someone from the outside, but it's part of my mitigation.
So if I understand correctly, the one-on-one aspect of communication, you think has a deep impact on tying people to a common goal, right?
Yes, and I think to be more precise, if you're supporting a large team, you know, just the tactic of you saying the same thing again and again is not effective enough. It's important, but it's not effective enough. You also need to find champions. And my own way to find these champions that will help me convey this message from across the team, you know, bottom up, not just me saying to my team, is through one-on-ones with, you know, individual contributors across my team's light interfaces, so across this team. And then I find the 1, 2, 3, 5 people that are very passionate about, you know, this message that I'm trying to convey, and I'm asking them to help me in delivering this message to the rest of the team, and they find their own ways in team meetings, in their one-on-ones, etc.
Okay, so my final question for the topic. Yes, Guy, you raised your hand. You have something to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I personally learned during this working from home, one thing we did, for example, in Waze, as I can say now, it was completely planned. We moved to work with squads, and this is small groups that have developers from all over the teams that are working towards a common goal, and according to specific OKRs, as we call it in Google, or KPIs, as we call it in the rest of the world. And this is really scaling out the organization, to continue what Yuval just said, because now you can actually have few teams and few leaders from different teams that are leading the organization in parallel. Of course, you need to have some architecture that support it, and you need the people to scale it, and you need the top-down OKRs to be very clear, but over-communicating is great. And second thing I wanted to add is I started my own feedback box even before the COVID, which anyone in the organization can actually write to me even anonymously. And since the COVID started, I'm getting a lot of letters in my anonymous feedback box, and I actually recommend everyone to do that. I learned a lot. I could help a lot of people.
What kind of messages did you get in your inbox? Personal?
First of all, many of them personal, people who are finding it very difficult to work. And I did find some way to help, because I didn't know what I didn't know. And I didn't know that we have issues in this team or that team. And second, there were lots of people asking for specific new processes to be built, whether it's different code reviews that should be done, or different risks that we can take with the production. You know, in Waze during this COVID, we have much less traffic for a few months. So we could actually take bigger risks and put into production what we in the past took a year to put into production. Suddenly we could take higher risk. And these all ideas came from developers inside the organization. I don't know why, but most of them chose to do it anonymously, which means that they will not speak up during a meeting or a forum or things like that.
Interesting. I mean, why not implement this even when working from the office in general?
I started it before the COVID. I'm just saying the usage of it became very intense during COVID.
Interesting. Actually, it raises a question, I mean, for all of our panelists. Feel free to raise your hand and answer it. What did your organization do that really you think helped in terms of giving tools to the employees, or providing them, as Guy said, with special means of communications? Anything that you think that really made an impact in terms of helping employees work remotely more efficiently?
I think one of the things that we started doing a lot more over the last 6 months is recording meetings. One of the things that is problematic when the team is dispersed and working across the globe, each of the persons on a different personal timeline, due to their own work-life balance situation and the choices that they make in order to, how they spend and share their time, it frequently does not allow gathering everyone that are needed for a meeting or for a session. You want to share some information regarding some architecture which is coming up, or you want to take a decision on some roadmap items that you have. And it's basically a challenge to make sure that everyone, to find a time which is suitable for all. And when you record a meeting, you basically allow people to offline attend that meeting. And you have to accompany that with some kind of an empathy and acceptance that, you know, some feedback which is important and critical will not happen online during that meeting. We might take a decision, but we're cautiously aware that we haven't accumulated all of the feedback and all of the knowledge that we should have, and probably in a different time could have spent time on. But here, basically, due to the fact that, you know, we can't gather everyone, we need to accommodate that and you know, accept the fact that probably some additional feedback will flow in within the next day or two as people type in, hey, only now I had the chance to check up that meeting. You forgot to take care of this case, or I have something important to contribute here. And sometimes, you know, it's a bit of this tango of, you know, two step forward, one step backwards, and stuff like that. But overall, I think it's very, you know, accommodating, and it makes people reassured that, you know, it's okay for them to actually go and, you know, help their kids attend the Zoom meeting at school, or and miss the morning session or stuff like that. They can still have the influence, they can still contribute, their opinion still matters and will be taken into account. And as a manager, as a lead, you need to accommodate and understand the fact that, you know, some things will progress slower, perhaps, than they could have been without this. But still, overall, the fact that we are able to do that on a consistent manner allows, you know, and especially us as a global company, where, you know, at any point in time, any day of the week, there's someone working on something which is relevant for your line of business and for your product and for your, I don't know what, next big event or whatever. It's still, you know, it's actually a much better practice than what we had before, where if I missed that meeting, then, you know, I lost my chance of making my voice heard and my opinion matter. And in that sense, I think it's nice for everyone to know that, you know, they can balance things out and still be able to contribute.
Actually, recording meetings seems such a simple idea. I'm amazed that it never crossed my mind to do that in that sense. By the way, Guy, you mentioned in our conversation earlier that you have a concept in Waze called virtual flights. What's that?
So, you know, Waze is a global company, and I guess the other one here also represent global teams. And our engineering group is located both in Tel Aviv and in New York. And suddenly, when COVID started, all the visits, the face-to-face visits, are gone. And what I found out is that managers from the engineering groups from both sides of the ocean needs to see each other. Now, if your office hours are not the same as the time zone, let's say, of New York, people don't feel comfortable to, you know, to set something with you at 11 o'clock at night Israel time. So what we propose is a virtual flight. I'm telling everybody at my home, I'm flying next week to be with my team in New York. And next week, I should walk starting noontime, but staying awake until 2 o'clock in the morning. And actually, I did it for a week, and it was very efficient. And then I started to walk from 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock. This is not so efficient. So what we need to make sure is that the virtual flight stay the same, and it goes both ways. And I think it's a great idea.
Interesting idea. And maybe less jet lag as well, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so guys, in the audience, by the way, I noticed questions. People are starting to have great questions, and some of them are really great. And I'll leave the kind of third part of the event for the panelists to answer your questions. Keep sending questions that we can select some of them to the end of our event. So our second topic of discussion today is the freedom for developers to choose the technology they wish to work with versus sticking to the company's standards and techniques. And naturally, each choice has its own pros and cons. So Karin, I'll turn to you first with this question. From your experience, how does the amount of freedom that developers have affect the innovation in an organization? More freedom is, in essence, more innovation?
Well, generally, yeah, I definitely believe so. I think that in some situation, more freedom is not only more innovation, but more of a mess and more of a bottleneck. So obviously, it needs to be balanced. But yeah, I can definitely say that our stack and architecture were mainly enriched in a bottom-up way. Okay, when engineers or teams of engineers felt free to come up with new technologies that were the best fit for what they needed to develop. And this is how we've added Node.js to our stack and Spark and gRPC, and these are just a few examples. It doesn't mean that what they wanted was automatically accepted, but it also didn't go through many committees or many channels. It was sufficient in most cases to get the permission from the team leader, who got some advice from other leads, or from the group leader. And I think this way creates a culture of innovation because it makes it easy to try new things. And without checks and balances, such as the same standardization process where new technologies are added, even on a regular basis, even if standardization exists, or without actively encouraging innovation in other ways, like hackathons, strict standardization without much freedom can create an atmosphere where suggesting new things is difficult, it's cumbersome, and the chances of actually introducing new technologies aren't too big, and it's not really a part of everyday life. And in Riskified, we're a growing organization. It's really important for me, while the organization grows, to be able to grow it also technologically, but I can't supervise 100 people one by one, and neither can the team leader. So I think it's really important when you need to grow to create a culture where engineers feel free to suggest solutions, and you don't have to go through a lot of channels in order to get them approved.
What is your criteria to rejecting such an offer or a request from an engineer? I mean, are there any red lines that you say, no, we can't try this and this technology because something?
Yeah, I would say that, it needs to be a combination of, we need to get a really strong value from this new technology that is applicable to a wide number, a big number of teams. It should be a good enough of a reason in order for us to start supporting this infrastructure with our infrastructure teams, because our infrastructure team provide tools and libraries for widely used technologies and languages. So for us to want them to make that effort, it needs to be something that adds additional value to what we already have and can be widely used by everyone.
So it's not just personal preferences from the engineer. He likes to work with, I don't know, Python, or likes to work with Node. It has to have concrete value to the company. That's
yes, I would say so, but I would also like to add, it's not a personal preference from an engineer, but if, for example, an entire team or several teams have this personal preference, then I don't think it's so much personal anymore. It comes with probably professional considerations as well, because I believe teams are a strong being. And if they have personal preferences, then it doesn't come out of the blue. It has reasoning, so I would probably take their input into consideration very seriously.
So if it's a request from the whole team, you take it more seriously than if it's just a one-off engineer thinking about some idea.
Absolutely. I generally tend to think that they can decide for themselves on a daily basis better than me, teams.
Ohad from Microsoft, you had an interesting experience in your organization the last few years when Satya Nadella took over the role of CEO in Microsoft, he made some serious changes in the company's approach towards different technologies, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's been an interesting personal journey, at least for myself. I joined Microsoft at the same week where Satya took office as the third CEO of the company, and it's definitely been a very different experience than what used to be the case on the first days when I joined, and probably on the decade before that, where Microsoft had a very own stack oriented approach with regards to tooling and how things are being built and designed from an architecture perspective, into something which is business, customer, user oriented, basically where the needs of the customers and users is taking precedence above anything else. And so if you look at Azure, the #1 operating system on Azure is Linux. We all use Git as our repository. We operate in an environment where it's not who build or owns those tools is what defines the priority. And I think in that sense, and we also had an interesting conversation about this earlier. It also takes some maturity in the sense of the choices that I make. Once I get the autonomous ability to take those decisions, it's with great power comes great responsibility. Like I need to choose wisely what's actually driving the business forward and what's most beneficial for my users, and not follow just the last hype or the framework which is the newest, but actually take intelligent and experience-based decisions. And I think we, as a company, we balance that quite nicely. And so you'd see a lot of open sources. If you'd count, contribution to open sources, Microsoft is now the biggest contributor of, whatever metric you wanna carry. We host a lot of projects as open sources from scratch, and we operate in a very, I think, open and transparent manner. Maybe also a bit humble. It's definitely a company that has gone through several life cycles and events. And so, when we approach things, we usually take into account that we probably don't know everything, and that there's a great degree of us attempting and giving it our best, but still fail, because competition is hard, and whomever is out there is just as intelligent and just as passionate. But nevertheless, I mean, that those cultural values is something that I personally relate a lot to, and is very reassuring for me as both as an individual and as a leader, to know that it's okay to try and fail and learn from those mistakes. It's okay to take decisions and reconsider them as things evolve, and that I work for a company that is accommodating of all of that.
It's amazing to see once again the impact of a strong CEO on the company's culture. It's an amazing transformation for Microsoft. But I make life a bit harder for you, because it's tempting to see what Nadella is doing is great, and we can all see the benefits from it. But there's also some benefit to eating your own dog food. If a company believes in its product so much that it operates, it works only with its own tools, that says something of a company, right? I mean, now that you're working with Linux, do you feel that does maybe lowers customers' confidence in the Windows platform, for example?
Well, we're not working exclusively with Linux. We take a decision based on the needs, the architectural needs, and the priorities. But there's a great common saying that says culture eats strategy for breakfast, and I think that's true. Like you can only target a team towards a strategic goal to a certain degree if your culture doesn't align perfectly with that, and you don't invest heavily in ensuring that the culture you want to strive to is actually something that you work on a daily basis and in an honest manner, and provides your full attention in order to make sure that the values that you put on a wall or in some PowerPoint deck or whatever is something that is really we're living our lives per which, and then in that sense I think there's a lot of efforts that are being put into that. And so when it comes to dogfooding, yes, absolutely. I mean, it's always a great way to proof and test and validate how solid your foundations are, and how good your product is or your platform is and your tools are. All of that is true, but if it comes at an expense of me being able to compete adequately, and it doesn't matter if it's when I'm competing with others on talents, and want to make sure that when I, as an employer, I provide an environment which allows people to prosper and grow and be challenged on a technical basis, not just on a product or those aspects. It doesn't matter if I'm looking at how efficient my platform is from a scaling perspective, or how performant it is, or how secure it is, or any other aspect. So I'll go back to what I said earlier. It's perfectly fine. I mean, I'd love to use. I'd love my own tools to be the best that there are out there. There are some cases where I think it works really nicely for us. Take, for example, VS Code, right? It's a
My favorite editor.
it's a very common IDE. I think it's extremely popular, even if if you're a I don't know, at a Vim or Emacs fan. It's definitely something that people consider as not as a Microsoft tool, or they don't look at the vendor that actually builds that. They look at the value propositions, they look at the fitability of that tool for the jobs that they need to accomplish. And when they see something that simply works, then they start adopting that. And so there are cases where it works. There are cases where even if you would build another IDE, but it would work for just you. Let's take, for example, I'm part of an organization which is within Microsoft that actually builds Windows. So our team operates and maintains the build systems that builds Windows. And as you would imagine, it's quite a unique, like a build system, right? There's so many, operating systems out there, surely at that size that you build. And so it's our own unique thing of its own, and trying to take that and say, okay, this is the thing that I want every build system in the world to be based upon. I think it's unrealistic, and probably would be a misfit for both, because this is something that you want hyper optimized for one specific goal, and not be generic. And that's the responsibilities that you have to balance those things.
Okay, so now over to Sivan from Wix again. Wix is a kind of very interesting and unique organizational structure. If I recall correctly, Wix is organized as mini companies inside the parent companies. You're a manager of one of these companies, the viewer company, but if I recall correctly. Now, each company can, I guess, use such and such technologies, but how do you keep the cohesion between the companies so that still the company operates with one cohesive technology?
So as you said, Wix has a very special structure. We have the companies, as I am managing one of them, and we have the guilds. The guilds are the professional guilds. For instance, we have the front-end guild, or the server guild, or the system guild, or the product guild, or the UX guild, and so on and so on. We have infrastructure teams that are related to the guild that are in charge of the infrastructure for the specific stack of the developer stack that are working in the companies. Like for front end, we have the UI infra team. It's not even a team, it's a few teams that are working on all of the testing environments and different tooling and the technology for the different technologies that we're using. And it is possible for companies to work in different technologies as we support different technologies at Wix. However, we do have the standard technologies that the company has decided to use across the entire company. So and this is something that is very, very important to the company and is one of our focus items for the past really long time, a few years, I assume. And it's even at the level that our CEO is involved in these things. He is involved in how people are using React, how people are writing components all over the company, and also the server infrastructure and server guilds and so on. So there are standard technologies that are used across the entire company. However, we do enable innovation. For instance, if a team or a company or even a single person has an idea that they want to introduce us to adopting a new technology, if this is something that is potentially will bring a lot of benefit at many different levels, because each company has different KPIs, then this is something that we will test and we will POC and we will try to understand the value of it versus the impact on setting up new infra teams and supporting the new the new technology on the infra level and tooling level and testing level and so on. So these are things that happen at Wix pretty often. Sometimes it's something that affects only the specific company. Sometimes this is something that is going to affect the entire company. Obviously, if it affects the specific company or the specific team, then it's an easier decision to make if we want to adopt a new technology or change or change the testing systems or the tooling and so on. But if it's something that's going to affect the entire company or even the entire Wix company across companies, then it's a harder decision, and the management is involved in this, as we need to change the infrastructure and how we provide tooling for these technologies and for the architectural change and so on.
So what is the role? I'm trying to understand, what is the role of the guild in that sense? I mean, a guild, for some of the listeners who might not be familiar, it's a kind of a cross-organization, mini organization, which kind of brings all the developers from the same methodology or the same domain, like front end, etc. So can innovation and usage of new technology emerge from a decision within a guild and not within a company, for example?
So yes, the guild can say we want to check different technologies. The guild actually usually won't decide that we're changing. Nobody will make a single decision that we're changing. Like if we're developing components in React currently, so it's not a single person decision to say now we're going to develop components, I don't know, in Svelte or something like that. It's something that needs to be done. Whomever initiates this needs to to explain it, to POC it, to understand the impact of this. We need to talk about this with people in the guild and in the different companies that this will have impact on and so on. So the initiative, it doesn't really matter where it comes from, as long as the idea is something that will bring a lot of impact and a lot of, and has enough benefit for it to be worthwhile. So it doesn't really matter where this comes from. And for your question about the guild responsibilities, the guild's responsibilities are way more than just the infrastructure. The guild provides us with meetups that are specifically related to our profession. Even if my profession is a product person or a UX or whatever it is, a developer, front-end developer, server developer, mobile developer, there are different guilds and they provide us with the ecosystem according to for our specific profession. The guilds are in charge of hiring and so on. So it's not only the infrastructure, that's only one part of what the guild is in charge of.
That's a very interesting concept, the concept of a guild. I think that's something that lots more companies will probably explore in the coming years. So right now we are coming up to the last third of our third part of our event. And as I mentioned, in a few minutes, we'll give our audience the opportunity to ask you the questions. But let's turn to our third and final topic for today, which is maintaining velocity and quality of products in a growing company. And I'll turn the first question in that topic to you, Yuval from Facebook. You had the opportunity lately to work on a new project, Instagram Lite, if I recall. And working for a company as big as Facebook with so many stakeholders in each and every product is probably not an easy thing for a manager to do when you want to innovate and start a new project. What was your strategy when you worked on Instagram Lite? How did you bring all the stakeholders to support your vision or your team's goals?
Yeah. So yeah, I think at a company at our scale where you're trying to make significant impact and get to hundreds of millions of users, you need to understand the different goals and values and principles that different organizations in the company have. Facebook tries to be a very bottom-up company, which means that different teams, different organizations will have their own set of values and set of principles, and they will do things very differently. And it's also relevant to the previous conversation about, architecture and standardizing architecture, which Facebook doesn't believe that you have to. And we let teams do whatever they want, basically. But also, you encounter these differences when you try to set goals and when you try to build strategy. Over the last 8 years at the company, where I had opportunity to work on multiple such cross-company projects from California and from Tel Aviv, doesn't matter. And I think one of the best tools that I developed or learned from others was to make sure you understand the principles of all relevant stakeholders and teams and partners. Make sure you understand your own principles and that you are not just being religious about some things, but you're actually being very thoughtful and intentional about what's important for you, why it's important, and also what's not that important. Even though you think it's a good idea, it's not that important for you. And I think once you understand what everybody really cares about and where everybody's coming from, you can form plans that will be some kind of a win-win, and they will serve, everybody's best interests, and everybody will be excited on them. And then, that's more of like the shaping the strategy phase of the project. And then when you get to like, okay, heads down, coding, designing, data sciencing, whatever phase of the project, then teams are really empowered at that point, and they can just like blaze through all the challenges because we already defined the strategy, the high level, and the team came up with the goals, and the team came up with the roadmap. And we factored in all the things that the different stakeholders across the company care about. And now when we start to actually do the work, teams can just like move really fast. So you might need to tolerate a little bit more time at the strategy shaping phase. And for very complex projects, obviously not for every small feature, but for building a new app from scratch that combines multiple worlds. And then I think that, yeah.
Yeah, you were saying?
Yeah, so you just need to tolerate a little bit more patience and investment in the strategy shaping time, and then you can move really fast and empower the team to do whatever they want and to just, work in a very autonomous way.
I can relate to what you're saying about understanding the needs and principles of other people who are stakeholders. But, you know, there's always the risk of, when you're going with that strategy in mind, that the decisions will ultimately become decisions by committee. And there's a saying I once heard that a camel is a cat designed by a committee, because we all know that committee decisions are not optimal and sometimes they delay or hold back innovation. How do you keep your vision and what you think should be the right way to go in such an environment? Do you try to persuade the other stakeholders, or you try to compromise? What's your go-to way of?
Yeah. So actually, I think that, you know, my go-to solution is kind of like the opposite than decision by committee. It's, you know, if the team really understands all the, you know, the entire universe and not just their own narrow perspective, then the roadmap and the strategy that they will come up with will be much more feasible. And that's where I think innovation really happens. So my previous manager, Joy Simchon, who probably some of you know, he used to have this saying, constraints are liberating. So I think when you just have like one big, you know, clean whiteboard, yeah, you can like go wild. But once you introduce some constraints, then I think where technical and product and design and data innovation really happens. And then I think where you see teams doing their best work, because they understand the world, they are the domain experts for the technology and for the product, and then they come up with creative solutions for, you know, to reconcile all the constraints. So actually, I think that this is a way of moving. I mean, whenever you have conflicts and the team doesn't understand the entire universe, then is when you need like a VP to decide, and you need to escalate things, and you need to, you know, and teams come to me and say, hey, Yuval, you have to talk with that director because we are in disagreement. But when the team actually understand all of these factors on their own, they can just like work around all of that and just move autonomously. So actually, I think that this is kind of like the way to avoid decision by committee.
That's actually a very smart principle, what Joyce Simchon said. As a writer, I agree. You try to limit yourself, constrain yourself. So
He's a very smart person, yes.
Yes. Last question for me, and then we'll go to the attendees' questions. For you, Guy, you mentioned before that in Waze, you had a big project, infrastructure project in the company that you actually used the pandemic as an opportunity to implement, right? Tell us a bit more about this project and how you kind of utilized the pandemic and the opportunity.
It actually relates to all the questions that you just asked. When you ask about standardization versus freedom, and put actually the innovation into it, I don't see it on the same bar, because every organization, every engineering organization, as far as I'm concerned, should challenge everything and don't take anything for granted. And when you're doing something new, try and do as many experiments that relates to just what was said. Do lots of experiment with the feed. Now, when you're getting into infrastructure or something that you want to change and have so much impact on your users, then you need to have standardization. Otherwise, you will have chaos and you will have single point of failure. And in Waze, in the last year, we have invested a lot in technical depth. We have some infrastructure that's been working with us for the last 8 years. And in the last year, we invested, just for example, we moved from AWS everything to GCP, not just because we are a very good corporate citizens in Google, but we need all kinds of new technologies. Now, and we did a lot of other things. Now, doing this, when you have 200 million active users on a daily basis, is very difficult. On a regular year, it will take us more than a year to implement such changes, because it's developing, moving everything from whatever, all the databases, moving to big table. We're all speaking the same language. But because of COVID, we, for example, decided to take more risks and put into production things that we usually takes longer time. So this is why it was a very good time to build infrastructure. Building this infrastructure do require innovation, and we are open for different kinds of ideas, but in the end of the day, you have to work according to standardization, code reviews, and once you choose a specific technology, it has to be used by all the other related servers in the company. Otherwise, it doesn't work in such a big company and a scaling and growing organization.
What were the kind of problems you encountered when you tried incorporating different technologies? Did it take more time, or what were the problems?
Well, simply a lot of risk, and you need to mitigate risk. When you are moving from, first of all, you need to develop something new, and then, as always, you're not thinking about everything. You need to test it, and you need to put it, at the end of the day, the things that matters is what impact the users. Only when it lands, you can actually see what happens. You can make all kinds of theory designs, but you need to see how it impacts the users, and you need to plan in accordingly. This is the most important thing.
Planning is important. So, okay, so we now come to the part where we get questions from the audience. Audience already has sent in several questions. First question that I'll give to you, our panelists, and especially to Yuval. The question is for you specifically, Yuval, but I'm guessing that others can also jump in. And we have an anonymous attendee writes, you spoke about finding the champions. How do you find those people? Are you looking for some specific character, or is it more about their professional skills?
Yeah, I don't think that I have a really good answer. I think it really depends on the topic that you're trying to kind of like promote on your team, especially and I think most people here described how their organization is kind of like bottom up, and we definitely believe in that at Facebook. So you just need to make a bet on a few candidates that will be excited and passionate about this topic. You also need to have, to trust their ability to execute and to communicate and to influence in general. And then you just try 10, 3 out of them will be excited about this topic and will, be at least as crazy as you are about this, and they will go with you for the ride. I don't think I have a more intelligent answer than that.
No, it's completely understandable. There was one question which I saw earlier, but I don't see it now, but I do remember it, which related to the onboarding process of new employees in this age of COVID pandemic. Did any of you guys have experience with onboarding new employees in that situation, working remotely? Yes, Yuval, I see that you have. And what did you learn? I mean, what are the kind of tips you can give our audience when they come to onboard a new employee? Yuval can start. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I saw Sivan raise your hand. So one sentence, just take your time. As us hiring the managers, and at least as importantly as the person joining, and in the tech industry, a lot of us are definitely, the people that join this company that are here on the Zoom in my grade are, overachievers, people who are used to be like top talent at every company they worked at. And yeah, you will get to it, but maybe it will take a little bit more time because working from home, your peers don't necessarily have time to support you because their daughters are throwing teddy bears at them while they try to do code review for you. So just take your time, all sides, and be respectful to the situation because it's crazy.
I think that one of the most important things when onboarding people from remote is that they have a lot of attention. So one of the things that we did in order to be able to grow at this time is that we actually nominated 3 new team leads in my group. We did that in order to make the team smaller, and then it's easier to onboard people because they have more attention to the new employees and also to their teams. So when you're onboarding someone at such a difficult time, they need a lot of attention because they don't have a team that they're sitting in the room with, that people that they don't even know, to take them to lunch and to get familiar with them, and then to ask them questions about their tasks and to do the full onboarding. So Wix obviously immediately had a lot of the onboarding moved to be online and presentations, and we have and have all these recorded presentations, and then we had the day where all the new employees and all that, we did that online and everything. But I think that what people need, it's similar to what Yuval said, that they take your time. Yes, they need a lot of time, but they also need a lot of attention. They need to meet with their boss and with their teammates often. They need to talk to them. And I think that I feel that in smaller teams, this works better because people feel more accountable for the process, and not when it's like big teams of like 10 or even more than that people. Then it works better in small teams, that people are accountable for the onboarding. And I saw that this is actually working much better in small teams when we onboard people that are, everybody's working from remote.
Interesting point. By the way, before I forget, that question was from Eran Levy. Thank you, Eran. And you raised, Sivan, a very interesting point, which I'm glad if any of you can corroborate and give more information from your experience. Are smaller teams easier to manage in the age of remote work than large teams? Did you guys feel the difference in size that sizes of groups really make? Anyone who had that experience?
I just agree with everything that you said. And I think just one more thing. If we actually onboarded more than few engineers during this period of time, and we'll continue to recruit if any of the audience wants to send their CV. Now, in this situation, we usually put a coacher, somebody that is always available for the newcomers. We call it new Wazer, and together they can build some of the tasks and some of the new development together in the squad, and this really helps. Plus, over communicating and doing some virtual coffee and trying to connect him to the team and to the culture, this really helps.
Okay, so I think we have time for one more last question from the audience. And interesting question, kind of open-ended question that Chanoch Aloni raised in our Q&A section. Did anyone experience the fear of losing control? I mean, that's something that managers often can feel, especially people who are more, control freaks by nature. But in this day and age of the pandemic, did any of you feel that you were kind of losing control over the teams?
I can share from my personal experience that I didn't feel that I was losing control over the teams, like people are going wild and so on. But I manage, my group is managed in a very personal manner, meaning that we sit together, we spend a lot of time together, we enjoy spending time together. There are groups of people that are really friends outside of work that became friends in work. And I think that I felt personally that it still is very hard for me not to see everybody every day and not talk to people and not to see how they are and not to see everybody's faces every day and to know that they're okay. And we had some organizational changes and some people were onboarded and some people left, and we have we had people that went on maternity, like developers that went on maternity leaves and so on. And when you don't meet people and don't see them day to day and you don't feel them and know how they are, and it's sort of feeling like you're losing control over the team, even though everybody's progressing and everybody's working and you know that the project is working well and the things are as planned, or even if they're delayed and so on, and you know what's going on the technical side. But sometimes when you don't see people and you don't feel them and their vibe and how they are and how they're dealing with this in the situation, the Zoom meetings are very formal. They're much less than the informal sitting outside having lunch together, or just talking and having coffee or whatever, where somebody just comes up to me and says, can we just go for coffee, or schedule 15 minutes, I want to talk to you about something. And it doesn't have to be related to work, it can be everything. And I think that the remote work is more formal, and people and I feel people less. So I do feel that at some level I did lose control, and I can't wait for us to get back to the office and just all sit together and work together again the same way we used to, even though I think Guy said this at the beginning of the panel, that it's not going to be the same. Things are going to change. And I don't know how they're going to be. So I'm excited to see how things are going to be and how we're going to work in this new environment when COVID is over. But for now, at some level, I do feel that we are losing control. As time goes by, it's getting harder. People are going in and out of isolations and quarantines and so on. And it's not easy.
Totally understandable. I think that all of us are kind of waiting anxiously for this whole period to end, getting back to something which kind of seems normal. So I think we've reached the end of our event. I'd like to thank all of our panelists today. So Guy from Waze, thank you very much. Yuval from Facebook, Karin from Riskified, thank you very much. Ohad from Microsoft, and Sivan from Wix. It's been very interesting for me personally to see how different organizations, different cultures tackle all the common problems that we see. Some organizations are more open, some are close, some needed to make big changes to what their daily lives were, but some felt it that were natural changes. And I think that everybody in the audience really learned from your perspectives. So thank you very much. Thank you to our audience. It's been great having you, and thank you for the wonderful questions, and I hope you enjoyed. And we'll meet again in future panels such as these. And I want to remind our audience that this event will be aired as part of a podcast, the Wix Engineering podcast, which is a show that deals with everything that is relevant to the culture of software and development and high-tech companies in general. And this panel totally fits the bill. So you can find the podcast at wix.engineering/podcast, wix.engineering/podcast. And thank you to all of our panelists. I remind you to keep your browsers open because we have a recording going in the background. I tell you so. Thank you very much and have a great week. Bye-bye.